Hear these words from the gospel. Jesus went out with his disciples across the Kidron Valley to a place where there was a garden, which he and his disciples entered. Now Judas, who betrayed him, also knew the place because Jesus often met there with his disciples. So Judas brought a detachment of soldiers together with priests from the chief priests and the Pharisees, and they came there with lanterns and torches and weapons. Then Jesus, knowing all that was to happen to him, came forward and asked them, "Who are you looking for?" They answered, "Jesus of Nazareth." Jesus replied, "I am he." Judas, who betrayed him, was standing with them. When Jesus said to them, "I am he," they stepped back and fell to the ground. Again he asked them, "Whom are you looking for?" And they said, "Jesus of Nazareth." Jesus answered, "I told you that I am he. So if you're looking for me, let these men go." This was to fulfill the word that had been spoken, "I did not lose a single one of those whom you gave me." Then Simon Peter, who had a sword, drew it, struck the high priest's slave, and cut off his right ear. The slave's name was Malchus. Jesus said to Peter, "Put your sword back into the sheath. Am I not to drink the cup the Father had given me?" So the soldiers, their officer, and the Jewish police arrested Jesus and bound him. First they took him to Annas, who was father-in-law to Caiaphas, the high priest that year. Caiaphas was the one who had advised the Jews that it was better to have one person die for the people. Simon Peter and another disciple followed him. Since that disciple was known to the high priest, he went with Jesus into the courtyard of the high priest, but Peter was standing outside the gate. So the other disciple, who was known to the high priest, went out, spoke to the woman who guarded the gate, and brought Peter in. The woman said to Peter, "You are not also one of these man's disciples, are you?" He said, "I am not." Now the slaves and the police had made a charcoal fire because it was cold, and they were standing around it and warming. Peter also was standing with them and warming himself. Then the high priest questioned Jesus about his disciples and about his teaching. Jesus answered, "I have spoken openly to the world. I have always taught in the synagogues and in the temple, where all the Jews come together. I have said nothing in secret. Why do you ask me? Ask those who heard what I said to them. They know what I said." When he had said this, one of the police officers standing nearby struck Jesus in the face, saying, "Is that how you answer the high priest?" Jesus answered, "If I have spoken wrongly, testify to the wrong, but if I have spoken rightly, why do you strike me?" Then Annas sent him bound to Caiaphas, the high priest. Now Simon Peter was standing and warming himself. They asked him, "You are not also one of his disciples, are you?" He denied it and said, "I am not." One of the slaves of the high priest, a relative of the man whose ear Peter had cut off, asked, "Did I not see you in the garden with him?" Again, Peter denied it. And at that moment the cock crowed. Then they took Jesus from Caiaphas to Pilate's headquarters. It was early in the morning. They themselves did not enter the headquarters as to avoid ritual defilement and to be able to eat at the Passover. So Pilate went out to them and said, "What accusation do you bring against this man?" They answered, "If this man was not a criminal, we would not have handed him over to you." Pilate said to them, "Take him yourselves and judge him according to the law." The Jews replied, "We are not permitted to put anyone to death." Then Pilate entered the headquarters again, summoned Jesus, and asked him, "Are you the king of the Jews?" Jesus answered, "Do you ask this on your own, or did the others tell you about me?" Pilate replied, "I am not a Jew, am I? Your own nation and your chief priests has handed you over to me. What have you done?" Jesus answered, "My kingdom is not from this world. If my kingdom were from this world, my followers would be fighting to keep me from being handed over. But as it is, my kingdom is not from here." Pilate asked him, "So are you a king?" Jesus answered, "You say that I'm a king. For this I was born, and for this I came into the world to testify to the truth. Everyone who belongs to the truth listens to my voice." Pilate asked him, "What is truth?" After he had said this, he went out to the Jews again and told them, "I find no case against him. Do you have a custom that I release someone for you at the Passover? Do you want me to release for you the king of the Jews?" They shouted in reply, "Not this man, but Barabbas." Now Barabbas was a bandit. Then Pilate took Jesus and had him flogged, and the soldiers wove a crown of thorns and put it on his head, and they dressed him in a purple robe. They kept coming up to him, saying, "Hail, King of the Jews!" and striking him on the face. Pilate went out again and said to them, "Look, I am bringing him out to you to let you find that I have no case against him." So Jesus came out wearing the crown of thorns and the purple robe. Pilate said to them, "Here is the man." When the chief priests and the police saw him, they shouted, "Crucify him! Crucify him!" Pilate said to them, "Take him yourselves and crucify him. I find no case against this man." The Jews answered him, "We have a law, and according to the law he ought to die because he claimed to be the Son of God." Now when Pilate heard this, he was more afraid than ever. He entered the headquarters again and asked Jesus, "Where are you from?" But Jesus, he gave no answer. Pilate said to him, "Do you refuse to speak to me? Do you not know that I have the power to release you and the power to crucify you?" Jesus answered him, "You have no power over me unless it has been given to you from above. Therefore, the one who handed me over to you is guilty of the greater sin." From then on, Pilate tried to release him, but the Jews cried out, "If you release this man, you are no friend of the emperor. Everyone who claims to be king sets himself against the emperor." When Pilate heard these words, he brought Jesus outside and sat on the judge's bench at a place called the Stone Pavement, or in Hebrew, Gabbatha. Now it was the day of preparation for the Passover, and it was about noon. He said to the Jews, "Here is your king." They cried out, "Away with him! Away with him! Crucify him!" Pilate asked them, "Shall I crucify your king?" The chief priests answered, "We have no king but the emperor." Then he handed him over to be crucified. So they took Jesus, and carrying the cross by himself, he went out to a place called the Place of the Skull, which in Hebrew is called Golgotha. There they crucified him, and with him two others, one on either side, with Jesus between them. Pilate also had an inscription written and put on the cross. It read, "Jesus of Nazareth, the King of the Jews." Many of the Jews read this inscription because the place where Jesus was crucified was near the city, and it was written in Hebrew, in Latin, and in Greek. Then the chief priests of the Jews said to Pilate, "Do not write the King of the Jews." But this man said, "I am the King of the Jews." Pilate answered, "What I have written, I have written." When the soldiers had crucified Jesus, they took his clothes and divided them into 4 parts, one for each soldier. They also took his tunic. Now the tunic was seamless, woven in one piece from the top. So they said to one another, "Let us not tear it, but cast lots for those who will get it." This was to fulfill the scripture, "They divided my clothes among themselves, and for my clothing they cast lots." And that is what the soldiers did. Meanwhile, standing near the cross of Jesus were his mother and his mother's sisters, Mary, the wife of Clopas, and Mary Magdalene. When Jesus saw his mothers and the disciple he loved standing beside her, he said to his mother, "Woman, here is your son." Then he said to the disciple, "Here is your mother." And from that hour the disciple took her into his own home. After this, when Jesus knew that all was now finished, he said, "I am thirsty." A jar full of sour wine was standing there. So they put a sponge full of the wine on a branch of hyssop and held it to his mouth. When Jesus had received the wine, he said, "It is finished." Then he bowed his head and gave up his spirit. It's Good Friday, and as you know, we're not having an in-person service. And I want to tell you that this is an intentional move by me. This was intentional because on Good Friday, I feel like we need to feel the way the disciples felt, separated from one another, not gathered in our community to support one another, forced to confront this day alone, just like they did, just like Jesus was. For us, it's different. We know that. We aren't abandoned like Jesus was. We have each other. St. Matthew's has a great focus on the power of community. Community that strengthens all of us in difficult times. You see, Christ Christ experienced the opposite. He was abandoned. He was left alone to suffer and to die, with his mother and the other strong woman followers watching him, along with his beloved disciple, while all those who swore to stay, while all those who said, "Jesus, I will follow you to the ends of the earth," left him to protect themselves. Good Friday is a day where we're not meant to feel good. Not about this story. There is nothing happy here in this story of Good Friday. This isn't a story about humanity's great compassion. It's a story about humanity's choice for violence. Because there's an important note about Good Friday, and that's that this event could have stopped. People could have stopped this event, yet chose not to. Jesus himself could have stopped this event. Jesus could have snapped his fingers and made everything go away, but he chose not to. So the question we have to ask on this Good Friday is why? Why? Why did this have to happen? And I think it's important we have to look inward today, just as Jesus did. You see, Jesus did something vital to our souls. He picked up that cross so we wouldn't have to. Jesus suffered on that cross. Jesus suffered by being tortured by the Roman soldiers to show us that violence is not the way. Jesus suffered to show us that love ultimately redeems, especially in the face of pain and violence. Good Friday, it's not the end of the story. You see, Christ picked up that cross, and he did it for us. But Christ did it also to show us that we can pick up that cross for others. We can pick up that cross to model what it means to know it is our love that redeems this broken world. It is our love that is redemption and hope in this broken world. It is not our propensity for violence. It is not our propensity to cast out and push away. No, it's our love that redeems. Christ did not fight back. He questioned. He told them that that was not the way, but they didn't listen. Good Friday today, it's about us listening. It's about us listening to help others find Christ. It's about listening to why Jesus picked up that cross, knowing that he did it willingly so that we may receive salvation. The question that we are left with today is about that cross. Will we, as followers of Jesus Christ, pick it up? Will we embrace salvation and share that with others? Will we help bear the pain of this world just as Christ did, so Christ's light can shine through? Will we know that we have a responsibility to let others know what following Christ means? And what does that mean? A life of sacrificial love. A life of support for others. Not a life of ease, but something more important. A life full of purpose.